we do need more inaugural lectures. I nearly did not say, please be seated. Thank you very much, colleagues, for working with that uncertainty. I want to greet this evening the Deputy Vice Chancellors that are with us this evening, the University Registrar, the Executive Deans of Faculty, the Deputy Deans of Faculties, academics, professors that are here this evening to support our colleague, Professor Amanda Werner. I want to greet, in particular, the Acting Executive Dean of the Faculty of Business and Economic Sciences, Professor Michelle May, whose faculty tonight is associated with the honor being bestowed on our colleague, Professor Amanda Werner. I want to greet all the colleagues from the Faculty of Business and Economic Sciences, members of executive and senior management, the entire professoriate, and all members of the academy, our students, our alumni, and our alumni association, and members of council that might be participating in this event. The family members of Professor Werner, her friends and colleagues who are sharing in this celebration in person and online. Honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sibongile Mutwa, and I'm the current Vice Chancellor of Nelson Mandela University. I am pleased to welcome you all this afternoon to the inaugural lecture of Professor Amanda Werner. I particularly wish to acknowledge and welcome Professor Werner's support network of family and friends. A warm welcome is also extended to Professor Werner's colleagues and collaborators, both here and internationally, especially those in her Faculty of Business and Economic Sciences who have supported and encouraged her on this long journey. Together, we take much pleasure in witnessing this important professional accolade, which in true academic spirit, you have all helped as fellow academics to nurture. You have all formed part of an enabling ecosystem that supported and catalyzed our colleague, Professor Werner's work over the years, and as such, you all share in this accomplishment. We thank you all for that. Professor Werner's lecture, Navigating Change Within Organizations, the Human Element, that's the title of the lecture, addresses an important societal challenge, that of organizations grappling with what appears to be constant change in uncertain and complex times in which we live. Her research makes an important contribution to the body of knowledge with its focus on the imperative of people-centered organizations and change, and pillars of change readiness within organizations, including organizational capability, employee readiness, communication, organizational culture, learning and leadership. Those of you that participated in the senior management retreat last week will remember that we dealt with this topic for the whole day last week. So we're very delighted to listen to your lecture, Professor. For our university, which has committed itself to placing its work and assets in service of communities and of society, by first and foremost striving to create an inclusive culture at our university. This is an important piece of work for us as the university. Nelson Mandela University aims for a values-driven and transformative institutional culture and takes genuine pride in its engaged scholarship, which seeks to co-create groundbreaking African-purposed solutions to complex planetary and societal challenges. This is part of a broader strategy to contribute more meaningfully to alleviating human precarity. Professor Werner's work resonates strongly with this focus and with this mindset. Professor Werner, we are honored to have you as part of the Nelson Mandela University family. We are proud of your accomplishments, and we eagerly look forward to listening to your lecture tonight. We congratulate you on your outstanding achievement. Being promoted to the level of a full professor is the pinnacle of achievement for you as a scholar, and a solid affirmation by your peers of your lifetime work. I now request the Acting Executive Dean of the Faculty of Business and Economic Sciences, Professor Michelle May, to introduce Professor Werner. Thank you very much. Enkosi baedanki ngiyabonga.
VC Mutwa, DVCs, deans, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. A special word of welcome to, I'm looking for him, Dr. Christopher Macrina. Thank you very much. He made his way from Cape Town this morning and unfortunately had a little bit of a car accident en route, so we apologize for that, but it was a nice surprise for Amanda. It's my privilege to introduce Professor Amanda Werner, a colleague and friend whom I've known for 30 years. Professor Amanda Werner is the director of the School of Industrial Psychology and Human Resources. She teaches undergrad and postgraduate courses across departments, schools, and faculties, and supervises many postgraduate students. She's a registered chartered HR professional with the South African Board of People Practice. She's a local girl. She attended Morava Primary School and matriculated from Andrew Raby High School, and she listed all the sports she participated in. I'm not going to do that, okay? And then she left our city to go to Potchefstroom to study a BA Honours and Masters program at the University of Potchefstroom, now known as Northwest University. 2 of these degrees were achieved cum laude. Before entering academia, Amanda worked within HR at the Sasol in Secunda. What most people don't know about Amanda is that she attended the Women's Army in George. I don't know if she wanted me to say that, but I did. She completed her DTech in HRM with us, and it was titled The Development of Best Practice Guidelines for Contingency Management of Health-Related Absenteeism. She has served as an editor and co-author of various academic textbooks within the field of HR, organizational behavior, and industrial psychology, with these textbooks being prescribed and recommended at universities across South Africa and one adapted for the Australian and New Zealand market. Amanda has supervised and co-supervised 11 doctoral students and 65 master's students. She's published, yes, it is sure. She's published peer-reviewed articles and presented at local and international conferences. She's a peer reviewer for a number of accredited journals, postgraduate examiner for universities across South Africa, and the reviewer for the NRF. Her internal service to our university is that she is a member of our healthcare committee, the honorary doctoral committee, and student disciplinary committees. She also serves as chairperson and panel member for several quality review committees at various universities in South Africa. And she's currently a board member at the Livingston Tertiary Hospital. Amanda is involved in internationally serving on assessment panels, facilitated global classrooms and assessments. As Omar to Joshua, Daniel, and Eden, they will tell you, perhaps not Eden, she's only about 5 months old, but they'll tell you she's really cool and she's really good at climbing trees. And on birthdays, they have jelly tots and Smarties for breakfast. She has an unquestionable work ethic and is the ultimate collegial and supportive colleague. She silently mentors, and not so silently mentors some of us, nudges us within the faculty to furthering our qualifications and studies and building our research portfolios. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Amanda Werner will now present her inaugural lecture.
Good afternoon. Vice-Chancellor, Professor Mutwa, all protocol observed. Thank you, Professor May, for the introduction and the kind words. We share a long history, and it's very nice for me that you are the one that is introducing me. I do feel a bit shaky now. I want to extend a warm welcome to special guests invited. Firstly, my family, my daughter Marcel, my son Brenton, my son-in-law Brenton, my grandchildren Joshua and Daniel, and my son Johan, who's currently in Malaysia. I'm not quite sure whether he's connected, he may be. My son Jan-Louis, his wife Jiajing, and my granddaughter Eden, even though she's only 6 months old, who are in New Zealand, as well as my 4 sisters and my broader family, with my nephew being here as well. Welcome. In addition, a warm welcome to special invited guests. Some of them are connected online. They're not here, but I want to welcome them. Dr. McRainer, I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much. It's a lovely surprise. Then Dr. Reagan Pieterse, who's in Saudi Arabia at the moment. Dr. Ophelia Veldkornet, who was also my PhD student. She's in George. Dr. Agnes Ndungu, who was from our university. She's now at Northwest University. And then Professor Janine Allen Spies from the University of the Free State, who was a great support for me. She's also my sister. And Mr. Kevin Gardner, thank you for your presence and thank you for connecting. I want to express my sincere gratitude to my colleagues in my department and in my school. I was quite apprehensive about doing an inaugural presentation, and it was a task for me to do, and I've done a lot of reading even for this lecture. But the goodwill that I got from my colleagues was absolutely fantastic, and I want to thank them for that. Also for my colleagues from other schools in the faculty, and from colleagues from other faculties. Your well wishes and your goodwill meant a lot to me. We are all part of the Nelson Mandela University, and with our students, we change the world. A warm welcome to my students who are present here and those who are connecting online. I did have a class scheduled for tonight at exactly the same time. In all the time that I've been at the university, I've never not had an evening class during a week. And those students do have an exercise linked to the inaugural. My inaugural presentation is on change. Recently, at the top fast-moving consumer goods company, a manager casually remarked, "We must turn this boat around." And immediately the following questions were asked. Who are we? What is around? Where to? Why must the boat be turned around? Who is on the boat? Who should be on the boat? Is the boat too big? Should the boat be 2 boats? Does the boat need a new crew, new technology, a new destiny? And what about the seafarers? Have they heard rumors of change? Or are they saying it's long overdue? These are the typical issues of concern expressed during change. So my presentation is on navigating change within organizations, the human element. Change is both technical and relational. So I want to put my colleagues from economics at ease. It's also technical. A most common reason given for considering the human element is to ensure buy-in and to reduce resistance. However, I argue that the world and organizations have become very complex and many challenges seem unsurmountable. For organizations, change has become a constant, with external forces of change, including technological advancement, economic shocks, global conflict, humanitarian issues, and environmental concerns. The current environment is described as volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Existing knowledge bases, traditional methods, are considered inadequate to resolve what is called the wicked problems of the world. And here we refer specifically to environmental, social, and governance-related problems, with these requiring research, design thinking, and innovative solutions. In practice, this means that meaningful change cannot take place without the involvement of a wide range of stakeholders and through inclusive processes. This is then also illustrated by one of my colleagues who recently did a presentation on social dialogue, Mr. Adrian Andrews, on the minimum wage law and the importance of social dialogue in order to make change. In South Africa, organizational change is also considered within the context of transformation, with the aim of creating a more humanized society, characterized by equality, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. For organizational change, this implies a focus on people issues and working towards a truly inclusive organizational culture. Leaders can no longer rely on a small group of advisors to come forward with rational solutions. Instead, they need a team of 1 million to make change. While vision and strategy provide technical guidelines for change, these need to be underpinned by an organizational ecosystem that is agile, anti-fragile, resilience, anticipatory, and ambidextrous. Ambidextrous refer to having to deal with many competing forces, having to focus on innovation and vision while also focusing on operations and implementing change effectively. Organizations need to be change ready, as change is not an event anymore, it is an ongoing process. Successful change is fundamentally a people issue, with change emerging from relationships being built, conversations being held, confrontation, and new ways of doing. As such, every person, whether a leader, a manager, an employee, plays a vital role in successful change. With this presentation or lecture, I will thus focus on change within organizations with a specific focus on the human element and organizational change readiness. So it is an imperative to have people-centered organizations. Ignoring the human element may be costly. In this respect, an evolving field of research is that on humanistic management, humanizing workplaces and a humanizing work experience. A humanistic philosophy is centered on the premise that every person in the organization counts, that every person needs to be deeply respected as a person and for the work that they do, and that every person needs to get opportunities to flourish. The human perspective positioned the organization as a community of people in which members collaborate to make a meaningful contribution to society and find purpose in doing so. The humanistic perspective contrasts with the economic perspective, which promotes measuring the value of people in terms of work hours, output, cost to company, and productivity. These competing values have implications for organizational change. Cameron and Quinn's competing values framework can be considered in this respect. Their framework highlights the tension that organizations experience in terms of focusing on structure and policy, focusing on the market and the customer, focusing on innovation, or focusing on the organization as a community. In this respect, Clement Bell, one of our postgraduate, our PhD students, supervised by Dr. de Villiers and myself, explored the link between spiritual leadership, a humanizing work experience, and employee engagement, with his study having relevance for organizational change. Spiritual leadership, a conceptualization by Fry. I do have a lot of references in here, but I'm not reading those. Spiritual leadership, a conceptualization by Fry, aligns with transformational and servant leadership in the sense that spiritual leaders, through creating vision, optimism, and altruism, create a deeper meaning for those involved. Instead of proposing change as a mechanism for greater efficiency and cost cutting, the leader aligns change with a deep sense of purpose. This leads employees to experience the work environment as humanizing with positive outcomes for employee engagement. The scientific term for employee engagement describes it as absorption, passion, and vigor. In practical terms, an engaged employee is one whose head, whose heart, and hands are fully concentrated on the task at hand. Humanizing workplaces foster engagement, resilience, and flourishing, with positive outcomes for both in-role and extra-role performance. Whether workplaces are humanistic is questionable, considering contemporary research on well-being, burnout, bullying, toxic leadership, and also the strain that leaders experience when organizations go through change. I must also say that my colleagues in the school are quite involved with studies on change and also on wellness. These studies suggest that the human element may be neglected in the workplace. Currently, we also have an ad hoc project in the school led by Dr. de Villiers and our postgrad students involved, and investigating the link between a humanizing work experience and employee well-being. Digitalization and automation as a change strategy may unintentionally create a dehumanizing work experience, as the use of artificial intelligence can lead to new forms of control that reduce employee autonomy. Research is therefore necessary to explore whether job applicants, newly appointed and current employees, as well as HR professionals, experience digital recruitment, digital onboarding, digital performance management, and digital communication as humanizing. Those employees who came on board during the COVID-19 period can attest to the adjustments within a digital and remote environment. Despite the advantages of digitalization, research shows that it also leads to isolation, detachment, techno-stress, and diminishing well-being. So it may be time for us to think again about what does it mean to rehumanize HR practices. Change is both a top-down and bottom approach. You've probably heard that. Change management is described as a planned and structured process, but this is disputed in modern times, with change being considered both top-down and bottom-up. Various change models had been adopted in the past. For example, Kurt Lewine's model presents change as 3 phases: unfreeze, move, and refreeze. In the contemporary times where we are exposed to change all the time, I'm not quite sure that we have the privilege of becoming refrozen again, and whether we should not stay unfrozen all the time. Kotter's model presents 8 stages of change, with these stages chronologically presented. If we revisit his model, we will see that it does refer to the involvement of people in change, but that may be limited involvement. His model promotes establishing a sense of urgency, creating guiding coalitions, creating and communicating vision, and empowering others. These models foster a strong top-down approach applicable to a more structured environment, and it is questionable whether they sufficiently describe the complexity of emergent change in diverse cultural environments, and a reconceptualization of change process is thus necessary. Today, change requires participation and leadership across the organization. Organizations are living entities, with change always emerging. Change is an iterative process of reflexive and generative inquiry, confrontation, learning, self-organization, and growth. It means that every person must be open to sharing, confrontation, listening, reflection, and co-creation. The image that you see is that of a polished ammonite fossil. Each chamber in the ammonite is both a product of the past, history, evolution, and a foundation for the next growth, a metaphor for iterative creation. It reflects spaces for sharing, confrontation, and learning, with these spaces all connected. It also reflects the cochlea, reinforcing the theme of deep and receptive listening, stillness, and movement, with divergence being seen in the outward spirals and divergence being seen at the center, with the core representing values and truth. So change does take place at the edge of chaos, and change facilitators, and we should listen to that because we talk about shared leadership. So change facilitation must also be broadly shared across the organization. With change facilitators creating psychological safe spaces like containers in which competing interests can be confronted. There's not a right or a wrong way anymore, and the paradigm is shifting from puzzle solving to mystery solving. Leaders in general struggle with the tensions that change presents, and they may have to think, and I'm talking to everybody here, the leaders, and they may have to start thinking differently about conflict. A normal reaction to conflict is to shut down, to blame, or to impose. But conflict should be seen as spaces to open dialogue. In the ammonite image, the tight inner course also represents resistance, and this comes from a place of self-preservation. If we get stuck there, we miss the opportunity for growth. Thus, change becomes top-down and bottom-up, involving both compliance and experimentation, stability and chaos, divergence and convergence, with opposites or different poles being brought together. Change is unplanned and planned, a science and an art, rational and intuitive. It leads to learning, innovation, and resilience. So, pillars of change readiness. Perpetual change requires organizations to be in a state of readiness. Change readiness is not about an event of change, but a mindset or a predisposition to be comfortable with and engaging with change. It is a belief that change is good and that the organization has the capacity, and we are the organization, have the capacity to deal with change. On an individual, the person who is change ready is cognitively and emotionally ready to accept, embrace, and adopt change, with an understanding that the status quo will change. An organization's change readiness is influenced by its history with change. Technical readiness, process readiness, cultural readiness, and people readiness. So the measurement of organizational readiness presents a first step in the change process in empowering employees, including managers, to voice out their opinions, express their needs, and become involved and committed to change. Through an ad hoc study and involving our postgraduate students, we identified main pillars of change and explored the change readiness of organizations within the private sector in South Africa. The 6 pillars of readiness identified through a literature study and measured through a quantitative survey are depicted here on the slide. Generally, the results of the study showed a low readiness for change. More positive but not great results were obtained for change for leader readiness, organizational culture readiness, and a learning development organization. And less positive results were obtained for organizational capability and for employee readiness. The lowest results were obtained for communication, with the analysis indicating that communication is strongly associated with employee readiness and organizational capability, demonstrating the importance of communication. Expanding further on the study, myself, Dr. Munodani, our postdoctoral fellow, he is here, and our postgrad students are currently busy with a study exploring the enablers of digitalization within the South African workplace. We also have a school project in the pipeline, which is on readiness for digitalization with Dr. Wayne McPherson taking leadership. In addition, we're currently in the process of analyzing data obtained in a study on communication in South African workplaces, focusing on supervisory work team, corporate, cross-boundary and informal communication patterns, and the outcomes for organizations and employees. So I'm going to highlight a few salient points related to each readiness pillar. And I'm going to start there with organizational capability. The results of our study on change readiness indicated neutral to negative responses for organizational capability to change. For organizations to have that capability, they do need dedicated change specialists, resources for change, managers and employees who are skilled in the management of change, and structures that promote cross-functional interaction. Leaders and managers should ideally receive training in change management processes and techniques for them to understand the tensions and contradictions experienced in change and to build resilience. Such training can also be used to build a support network for managers. A big problem in organization is silos, and creating platforms where people can share across functions actually help them to break those silos and to look more broader at the system and how things can be improved altogether. So pivotal questions to be answered are whether managers, supervisors and employees are properly equipped to deal with change, and whether they are able to use change management processes properly. Employee readiness for change. Change brings uncertainty, fear and anxiety, but may sprout from employees being skeptical about the reasons for change, being recipients rather than participants of change, and having to rely on their peers for information and concerns for their job security. Resistance to change can be expected, it's natural, but such resistance should not be seen as opposition. It should be seen as opportunities for dialogue, for feedback and engagement. Conflict is not a bad thing, it's how we deal with it. Employees do want to know what's the purpose of change, what is in it for them, and in general where the organization is heading to. Our survey results showed that employees were not comfortable with change, and they reported a general lack of support, which may reflect on the general employment relationship between supervisors and employees. On a more positive note, they did indicate awareness of the organizational vision, how events in the world that affect their organizations, as well as how their jobs contributed to the overall vision. Communication. Successful organizational change and communication are indistinguishably connected. However, our study showed that communication related to change was generally neglected, with the results being neutral to negative. Communication fosters knowledge of change and participation in change. Top-down communication may be too structured, formal, and detailed to energize and inspire employees. Inclusive information are of utmost importance. Middle-level managers play a crucial role in change communication. But if they're not part of the process, ill-informed or excluded, they will create rumors and negative attitudes to change. So in general, in organizations, there's often a barrier between senior management and employees at the bottom. And that barrier comes from supervisors and managers that do not buy into the change process. So that is one area in change in general that can get attention. Managers must know how to share change-related communication, and feedback loops need to be created. I want to say something about organizational culture because that is so important. You did see the crocodile there. I hope you noticed. The quote, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," is famously attributed to Peter Drucker. It's not even 100% sure he did say that. But I did include the crocodile. Organizational culture means shared values, beliefs and norms that affect how people think, feel and behave in the organization. People often do not know what their organizational values are. I've often sat in workshops and I talk about organizational values and I ask employed people, what are your organizational values? And they grab their cell phones and they Google what the organizational values are. Even though organizational values are supposed to present a moral and an accountability compass, in a current study on value adoption, and I hope my student is also watching, conducted by an MBA student, relative positive results were obtained in terms of value adoption. And the results showed that there was no significant differences in value adoption between managers and employees. 70% of the respondents also indicated that their managers included values in their performance management conversations. The study showed significant positive correlations between value adoption, the communication of values, and value-based management. In terms of the learning organization, learning requires intellectual humility, as one needs to be open to the views of other people. One of our PhD students, she's now Dr. Ophelia Veldkornet, she graduated in 2024, supervised by myself and Dr. McPherson, conducted a mixed method study to explore intellectual humility in an academic environment, specifically from the perspective of early career academics who may experience imposter syndrome when joining the academia. I experienced a little bit of that because when I had to do this speech, I felt a little bit like I'm not impostering with all those that came before me. The early career academics interviewed by Dr. Veldkornet perceived intellectual humility as a fundamental requirement for learning, critical thinking, building partnerships, and addressing change. Maluleka, 2024, found that senior academics often suffer from hubris due to being considered as legitimate knowers, while the knowledge of early career academics, and especially those from marginalized groups, are delegitimated. It has implications for organizational culture, and we all, in all organizations, have a role to play in bringing voices out and providing safe spaces for conversations to take place, especially if we think of the wicked problems of the world that had not been solved by previous knowledge, but maybe perhaps even created by previous traditions. Leadership is a very broad field, and my valued colleague, Professor Poisat, gave a very nice inaugural, if you remember, on the development of leadership. I'll just latch on a little bit to his presentation. Two leadership issues are especially important in the context of change. Firstly, how do we lead change? And secondly, what is the leadership brand of the organization? I think it will help leaders a lot if they have a clear understanding of what the brand is that the organization wants to promote, because leaders experience so many tensions in terms of what is the right thing to do. Obviously, there's not one magic style out there, but in terms of the culture and the values of an organization, what is the leadership style and the brand that we want to develop? That obviously bring change, bring voices in, acknowledge people, create opportunities for them to flourish, involve them. There's unanimity among researchers that the great man leadership philosophy is archaic. I'm a little bit worried about that one. Leadership is not about a heroic figure anymore. It is a group activity and a social practice. The collaborative, future-thinking leader, no, they don't have all the answers. They are comfortable with complexity. They seek opportunity, use vision and strategy in an agile manner. They are ambidextrous, as I've mentioned already, and they call on a team of 5 million. I'm drawing from leaders in the COVID period. Ambidextrous leadership reflects the tension leaders experience during change in terms of being innovative and ambitious, while having to focus on effective implementation of change and still on operations. I feel we can revisit the characteristics of transformational leaders. Lots of students and staff do studies on transformational leadership, And we look at the elements or the behaviors and the main characteristics of transformational leaders. And I'm not always sure we really understand what those characteristics means. One that stands out for me in terms of change is intellectual stimulation. Leaders encourage people to think, and they bring their thinking into the discussions, and they create opportunities for confrontation of alternative ideas. They use idealized influence, and leaders are also, they're optimistic. They look at the future in a positive way, and they bring that across to their followers. They also use individualized conversation, and that is focusing on the individual, irrespective of many people, and many people that, or followers, people that report to the leader can still connect. I always say to my students, if I wasn't a teacher, I would be a preacher. And I always say that when one has children, you learn that you can't deal with them in the same way. Each one is different, and you have to build a unique relationship with each one. Now, I think my children are listening and so on. But that same principle applied to how we lead people, that each individual in our teams is a unique person, and we need to connect with that person on a unique level to bring the best out of that person, to let that person flourish. A danger is the transformational leader who initially is being admired for charisma, influence, and grandiose vision, but once the pressure is on, switches and disassociates, becoming a toxic leader that isolates people rather than unite them. And I'm almost out of time. I was going to say being members of the Nelson Mandela University, and I draw a little bit from the VC. We draw on the iconic ethos of Nelson Mandela. This means as leaders, we should be less transactional and more transformative, focusing on images and creation, the world of the soul being authentic and ethical, and the spirit being servant leaders. The last bit that I want to add is on trade unions as leaders of change. I thought some trade union members will attend, and they're going to come and say, what about the trade unions? One of my master students, Sipelele Mzondi, he conducted a mixed method. He was supervised by myself and Dr. Ophelia Veldkornet. He conducted a mixed method study on the role of trade unions in organizational change in South African organizations. The output of his study was a framework for union participation before, during, and after change. The results of the study endorsed trade unions as relevant stakeholders in the change process. A conclusion of the study is that, among others, trade unions should give more attention themselves to relationship building, communication, persuasion, and debating, with both trade union and organizational representatives adopting an us against the problem rather than you being the problem attitude. While trade unions are concerned about what happens around change within organizations, they're also subjected to change themselves. With the changing world of work, characterized by diminishing long-term employment and the rise of temporary, freelance, and outsourced work, trade unions may have to devise their strategies to also represent vulnerable and flexi employees, lobbying for their rights, while at the same time ensuring that AI practices used in organizations are not biased based on age, gender, and race. Many of my colleagues in the school are busy with research on digitalization across the HR value chain, enablers of change, and also organizational change readiness in terms of that kind of change. In conclusion, the organization is an ecosystem, and we are the curators of this system. Successful navigating change in a complex world requires wide acceptance of change, involvement, visionary thinking, collaboration, collective intelligence, and broad-based action. The most profound change work is organizational culture. People are not the object of change, they are the change. Thank you.
Amanda was reminding me that in the procedure papers that I shouldn't hug her because those papers were drawn up during COVID period as well. So I gave her a hug before we entered the hall. Professor Werner, it is my privilege to, on behalf of Council, Senate, our Vice-Chancellor, and the entire university community and beyond, congratulate you following this deeply insightful and timely inaugural. It was certainly a very, very interesting treat. Thank you very much for that. Please give her a warm round of applause. Your lecture has illuminated the profound truth that while change is inevitable, meaningful transformation is only possible when we center the human experience. You have reminded us that organizations are not just systems and structures. They are communities of people, each deserving of dignity, respect, and the opportunity to flourish. Your exploration of humanistic management, change readiness, and the pillars of people-centered transformation from leadership and culture to communication and learning has offered us not only a framework for navigating complexity, but also a call to action. On behalf of the university community, I would like to thank you, Prof. Werner, for your scholarship, your leadership as Director of the School of Industrial Psychology and Human Resources, and your unwavering commitment to advancing the human element in organizational life. I would now like to take the opportunity to share a message with you from the President of the Alumni Association. Dear Prof. Werner, congratulations on your inaugural lecture. The Alumni Association looks forward to your support and involvement in our activities. To mark this very special occasion in your academic career and your time at our university, on behalf of the association, I would like to present you with this symbolic gift. Now, in fact, they should have warned me because it's normally somewhere here, you know. Okay, change readiness is very, very low on this side. And of course, just to end the message from the Alumni Association, they are wishing you all the best for your future endeavors. To our guest, thank you for joining us in celebrating this important academic milestone here and online. Your presence affirms the value of collective reflection and shared learning. To the organizing team, thank you for ensuring that this evening unfolded with such grace and professionalism. And finally, to Prof. Werner once again, may this inaugural lecture mark not only a celebration of your achievement, but also the beginning of new conversations, new collaborations, and new courageous change initiatives. Colleagues, family, and friends, you are invited for light refreshments in the foyer. May I request the audience to stand whilst the academic procession leaves the venue. Thank you. That's a brilliant lecture. You have to take notes.